Thanksgiving week, and we'll take a chance to talk about both some new updates on two of the nation's top recruits, at least one that we know is now not heading to LSU, and another that appears to be trending elsewhere as well as taking some time to talk about some of the updates on the high school side as the LHSAA playoffs continue, and some matchups that we're thankful for, some student athletes that we're thankful for the opportunities to have had a chance to cover, and hopefully to have a chance to cover again in these next few weeks. This is Louisiana versus All Yells Recruit That Boot. He's Sam Spiegelman. I'm Jarrett Roser. What's up, man?
Sounded like you were signing off for a second. Doing great, man. I've had a bad string of games here locally as I've been kind of hitting the scene back around Austin, but super stoked because this is my second year in Texas. So I knew from last year that after Thanksgiving, they do these very cool like multi-game second or third round matchups at like stadium, so you can get to see like a doubleheader or some case like a whole weekend in a stadium. So I'm excited to take full advantage after two weeks in a row where I either stayed home or some of the guys I went to see got injured in the first half. I'm excited. I got a doubleheader in the Alamo Dome on Black Friday. And I'll be doing some my shopping at halftime, which will keep me engaged for those 28 minutes. And then on a Saturday matinee, getting to see Duncanville against the Woodlands is actually a rematch of the game I went to last year. And the Fighting Hippo Stadium is amongst my favorite in the entire country. It is beautiful and beautifully located, just 30 minutes from my house, which is the same distance Destrehan used to be, which, and that has taken that special place in my heart.
That sounds pretty cool. And we're going to have a chance to talk about some of the LHSAA playoffs toward the end of this. I can't complain because I get Memphis at Tulane on Thursday night, and then a high school game that I still haven't decided on for Friday, and then Oklahoma at LSU on senior night on Saturday. And so I get plenty of football over a couple days span, but that opportunity to have several playoff games in one kind of big venue and big event setting sounds pretty cool. Let's get into these two recruiting updates to kind of lead things off. Bryce Underwood obviously has been kind of the talk of, I'd say, the past week, but it had already been ramping up drastically before that, and we've talked about the situation a couple times previously. But Thursday night, he announces that he is flipping from LSU to home state Michigan. We'd already finished our recording for the week prior to that, and so this will be the first time we have a chance to really unpack all of that. We don't have to dive into a lot of how the heck this happened. There's a lot to that behind the scenes, but I think certainly the biggest question now for LSU is how they move forward from this. But just kind of setting the stage, how big of, we call it at Rivals, where you're at or where I used to be with you, the sting factor of a loss into your recruiting class. I mean, how big is this for Bryce Underwood to now be staying home at Michigan after how much of the excitement of LSU's class centered around him as the face of it?
Yeah, well, for all the same reasons that he was the centerpiece of LSU's class, he's a generational talent. He's the number one or number two player in the country, and certainly if he's not, he has a very compelling case as it. One of the best high school athletes that plays the quarterback position we've seen. And, I think you see maybe one, maybe two of these kind of kids at this level of athleticism, the way not only is he a great athlete, but he's a great quarterback. I'm dwelling on the athleticism as, we talk about quarterbacks that are built to play this modern game, much like Jaden Daniels, with the ability to extend plays and make plays when plays break down and maneuver within the pocket. But, we got to see Bryce at Friday Night Lights. And if you watch the tape of him, what he does at Belleville, he has won a state championship there, which is always great for your pedigree. He just has an enormous upside at the most premium position. And I don't know if he's a ready to go level kind of kid, but he's one of those guys that, by his second year, you're kind of expecting him to take over the reins of an offense and he's that kind of game changer. And the thought of him playing for Joe Sloan and Cortez Hankton just after Jaden Daniels did it was the reason for all that excitement in LSU. So in terms of the sting factor, which is a great throwback, it's astronomical. It's absolutely astronomical, and it's equally as substantial for the future of that Michigan program. You know, we've said it on the podcast. He resides 30 minutes from campus in Ann Arbor. So, you know, for a parallel, this is like a kid from Gonzales or a kid from Livonia, going to a different program, or just going, being committed to Michigan, for instance. Maybe it doesn't make sense to certain fan bases, but he grew up a Michigan fan. There was always pressure on him to stay home, but he was able to really effectively drown that out for the bulk of his recruitment, steadily visiting Baton Rouge. And the relationships with Joe Sloan, and they might be stronger than they are with the coaches at Ann Arbor. I think that's only for Bryce to know. But the pressure, the NIL package, and obviously the alumni base that was able, Matt Zenith reported the Tom Brady involvement in that. I mean, when you grew up as a fan, it's easy to kind of fall in love with that idea. So it's as astronomically bad it is for LSU. It's equally as phenomenal for Michigan.
It seemed like there was kind of a perfect storm when you talk about everything that you're talking about on the positives, the Michigan side, the money factor that got involved that LSU didn't seem to really be able to match as deep as the pockets were up there for Michigan supporters. If I didn't already say the Tom Brady involvement and whatnot down the stretch, but also simultaneously in Baton Rouge, LSU is losing 3 straight. Things are getting kind of frustrating there. And so a lot at play that made it really difficult for LSU to potentially hang on to Bryce down the stretch. And that is what it is. I mean, he's heading on and playing for his home state program now in the years to come. And he's just as talented and exciting of a prospect as he was a week ago, as much as LSU fans might want to try and find some ways to feel differently. I think it's as big of a sting factor as it possibly could be, but at the same time, kind of finding some level of threading the needle and nuance to the situation of you may not have a prospect that you could feel more strongly about and the kind of impact that they could have at the next level, but it's also one high school prospect in a world that we've seen has been an inexact science through the years, both in terms of how guys pan out and whether guys stick around and what sort of variations of circumstances they may be going into and what the effects could be. And now LSU needs to look at what it does have, which is a guy in Garrett Nussmeier that very realistically could be back next year. You have some young quarterback talent in that room already in Colin Hurley, who was much heralded a year ago coming out of high school a year early. You have a kid in Ricky Collins from the previous year that we both liked an awful lot at Woodlawn Baton Rouge, is the hometown guy in that purple and gold that some fans have been calling for at times this year already. And so the cupboard's certainly not completely bare in that room. And then the class remains one of the top classes on a national scale right now. And so can Brian Kelly and company hang on to the rest of that group? And can they they said they still want a 2025 edition at that quarterback spot, and what directions do they go? What is your outlook for, I guess, the future for where they are at quarterback and where this class is as a whole, as you try and kind of focus in on the LSU side and reasons to still be optimistic or ways to pivot and kind of respond to the loss of Bryce? Just kind of what are the biggest storylines now that is kind of in the rear view and where to move forward with?
Yeah, I'm curious in what direction they end up going with if they're able to get a 2025 quarterback. I know that the staff has certainly touched base with a number of 2025 quarterbacks, both committed and a few uncommitted that have since committed. That this quarterback carousel has gone crazy, in recent weeks. So nothing is beyond the point of like happening. However, we are now, at the time of recording, 8 days away from signing day. They have one weekend to get a quarterback on campus, which opens the door. But I know that some of the quarterbacks have shown that Sloan has reached out to, have shown some interest, and some have since shut down their recruitments, and it's a little bit too late in the process. Which, to me, it's a hard pill to swallow to get a quarterback to change their mind, unless you've been on them, while they were, while behind the scenes. But to my knowledge, I'm pretty sure that Sloan was loyal to Underwood as much as Underwood was up until a certain point with Sloan. So obviously, if they are, I'd be curious to see who has seen your tape that staff is watching. That staff obviously has a few 2025 quarterbacks in Louisiana, in Texas, in Mississippi to potentially offer. My gut tells me if they're unable to get maybe, I know they've reached out to Keelan Russell. He's locked in with Alabama. I believe they've touched base with Bryce Baker, who's committed to UNC. Penn State has been talking to him. UNC just fired Mac Brown earlier today. We'll see. We'll see if a visit can transpire. This weekend might just tell us what LSU is thinking, but my gut tells me is that they're going to be hitting the transfer portal. I very much see Garrett Nussmeier, because of this second half days that he was in with some of the turnovers, kind of coming back to try to improve his stock. At one point, he was kind of in that first round territory, so he can kind of do what Quinn Ewers did at Texas this year, and Quinn figures to be one of the first 3 or 4 quarterbacks off the board. But I see them going to the transfer portal. I wonder if Colin Hurley, or I don't think Ricky Collins, but I wonder if Colin Hurley or AJ Swan, out of state guys, are more prone to possibly hit the portal with looking for an opportunity. And if Nuss Buzz does come back, obviously that takes away the opportunity for them to compete this spring as previously expected with Bryce Underwood.
It's a position that at the college level we've seen, to your point with the transfer portal, it's as volatile as any position on the roster. And looking at the recruiting process, you mentioned it's tough with a quarterback in particular to make that move late in the game when there isn't a foundation laid, because it seems like in modern recruiting, other than the top couple of guys in the class, a lot really unfolds right on the heels of that junior season, that it starts to really ramp up that winter and spring, and then it's all very condensed and trying to get commitments made by that summer. Quarterback's a little bit of a different story, where that's a years long process of building that rapport, knowing a guy that you think is going to be the face of your franchise, so to speak, for the years to come. Is that guy both on and off the field? From his perspective, knowing the relationship with the play caller and whatnot. And so they're certainly really behind the 8 ball and have a lot to figure out here really quickly, at least as it relates to that program. And also trying to make sure, there are other guys in this class that could be heading elsewhere. You try to potentially hang on to a Derek Meadows, who looks like he very well could still stick with Bryce Underwood and head to Michigan, and trying to hang on to a few other spots, and just hope that this trend in the modern NIL recruiting era of losing guys 10 games out isn't something that bites you in too frequent or too big of places around this class. How concerned are you, kind of big picture wise, to see Michigan come in and be able to make the move that it made, and hear some of the numbers that got thrown around late? How concerned should an LSU fan base be, where there's been question marks of, where is their collective and their buying power, so to speak, from an NIL standpoint? How can that possibly stack up with some of the Texas schools or some of the big schools up north, and, the Oregons of the world and whatnot? How concerning, in just a general sense, in the new era of college football recruiting, is the Bryce Underwood development for LSU? Do you feel like this is something that is going to be problematic for the Tigers in other instances in a very similar nature, or is this kind of a rarity that we see for them moving forward?
I don't think it's I don't think it's too big of an issue because I think eventually it will sort itself out. I think Michigan was a program that this time last year was kind of falling behind the 8 ball in terms of NIL, and that's even more interesting considering they were coming off of a national championship. LSU has a rich history of winning national championships pretty frequently, and they've done so under different coaches. And largely, it's because they've not only had great coaches, but they've had great players that have come through LSU. And more recently, the wave of players have prospered exponentially through the means of NIL. I mean, some of the most famous NIL athletes are either currently or have come through Baton Rouge. They are ahead of the NIL game in certain aspects. They've been able to get key transfer players and win recruiting battles with the help of NIL. But, there's, again, like Bryce Underwood is in this 1% of this recruiting cycle. There's not many Bryce Underwoods that come and go. And as we get into the conversation about the next recruit we talk about, there are just certain recruiting battles that are going to be won with the help of these NIL collectives. Now, Tennessee has one, USC has one, Oregon has that, and Nike, obviously, Ohio State and Michigan have it. Which Georgia Tech is putting together. It's Texas and A&M are both very well off in that regard. So is SMU and TCU, like you mentioned, all the Texas schools. I just think it's a matter of time before LSU's, officials get together and organize this so that they can be more competitive when the recruitments get to that factor, which, let's say it, NIL is probably a factor in most recruitments, if not all, but is not the overlying factor in every single recruitment.
I think people should also realize, and I don't think I'm saying anything that's going to, shatter anybody's prisms at this point through which they view college athletics, but money has always been a factor in the recruiting world. It's maybe exponential at this point, and it is a lot more upfront at this point to where more people understand what's happening and more people are involved because they feel like it's more green lit because of the NIL dynamic. But some of the factors are not new. It's just kind of a different extent of it, I guess, at this point. And also credit to LSU, as much as we watch and kind of try to gauge where they are in terms of their ability as a collective and the financial support around that program to match some of these others around the country. I do think they have made great strides in recent years in terms of that organization and getting more in play with some of this than maybe they were prepared to a couple of years ago. And so I don't want it to sound like they're still kind of out there trying to figure it all out. They're definitely taking steps. But let's jump into that next prospect that you alluded to, a guy right here in state, Jahkeem Stewart from reserve, and has played his high school ball. What we've seen of it in New Orleans. And obviously LSU has been involved with his recruitment from the time he was a big middle school standout. And now Ohio State, Oregon, USC have all been really heavily involved down the stretch. Michigan kind of re-upped with him last week and has tried to make a strong push late with Jahkeem. You entered a future cast that you feel like USC is kind of the team to beat now, just over a week out. What has trended so well for the Trojans here on the heels of this final run of visits for Ja?
I think it's probably the USC themed shirt that you're wearing has really caught his eye.
This is Pelicans. This is Pelicans.
Okay. Okay.
Don't you dare do that to me with these LSU fans right now.
The Victory Trust has also gotten to you too, Jarrett. No, I think listen, the Big Ten teams have been trending in this recruitment for different junctures. I believe that Ohio State became kind of the team to beat at a certain point in the spring or summer. And I think that Oregon and USC jumped to the forefront after this wave of official visits. Jahkeem and his camp have made, I think, upwards of 4 visits to each of these schools over potential. I think depending on if they make it to the shoe this weekend, out to USC, out to Oregon, out to Ohio State, and in between have managed to make the short drive up to Baton Rouge. And the more after each of these visits, the biggest takeaway I got was that he was definitely going out of state, which I was, listen, I think LSU is going to continue to scratch away at this one. And if things fold a certain way, LSU will be there, to clean up in the end if something goes crazy. But after this wave of official visits and then a weekend back in Eugene during their bye week, basically able to give him an unofficial second official visit. He was there from Friday through Monday. The sense was that USC had made him such a priority. There is a easier path to the field. They've obviously lost. They're losing a lot of seniors. There's a chance to play for a guy who's from New Orleans and Coach Henne, who also has a fantastic resume working with, who most people consider the GOAT of Aaron Donald. And he's a very close pal of Aaron Donald. And he went to Ed Dakar, which is where Jahkeem transferred to a couple of weeks ago. So those connections on Huntley Drive are very, very strong. Listen, I think nothing is done in recruiting. And additionally, that during USC's official visit, he met with a lot of high-ranking people, not only in the athletics department, but in the university and outside of the university. And I think those people made significant points to the people involved in this decision-making process. So I was told after this visit to Oregon, USC still was kind of in front, either tied with Oregon or in front, and that's coming off of the visit to Oregon. So I felt pretty decent about putting in that pick. Obviously, it's still a fluid recruitment. There's a chance, I'm told, that he might not make it to Ohio State, but I'm probably expecting that they'll show up to the game just a couple of days before signing day. But at the end of the day, I think USC is now the team to beat. And that's all I got to say, I think.
That's all I have to say about that. We'll be watching Jahkeem certainly over the next week and a half. He is the biggest name in Louisiana right now in terms of this 2025 class, since his reclass and kind of microwaved end stretch to his recruiting process now, and what would have been his junior year, now taking these final trips to prepare for a decision here in just over a week. Focusing back on these LHSAA playoffs and some of the other fantastic athletes around the state that we've been really thankful to have the opportunity to cover. As I mentioned, we want to talk about some guys that we've been thankful about, as well as some matchups that we're thankful that we get a chance to keep an eye on this Friday. And so we will each share 3 guys who their high school careers have now wrapped up, but we're thankful for the opportunity to have covered them. This is certainly not an exclusive list in the sense that there are going to be plenty of guys that we've been thankful for through the years, but just wanted to shout out a few guys as they kind of wrap it up and start looking on to the college level. Also look at 3 guys that we're excited that, thankful for the opportunity that they're still playing, and potentially another opportunity to see them maybe for the first time this season or first time of their high school careers, potentially on a Friday. And then also, again, 3 matchups in these quarterfinals we're thankful for. And Sam, I'll let you lead it off in terms of, a senior whose high school career is now wrapped up, that you just kind of wanted to express some gratitude for the opportunity to cover and the relationships to be had there with him, his family, or whatever it may be. Who do you want to mention first?
All right, I'm going to start with my boy, Keelan Moses. I love Key. I love his whole family. Still get to cover Man, which is still fun. And we have a couple more years of him growing up and going through this recruiting process. But, I was not as close with Dylan nearly to the magnitude of that I am with Keelan. I jumped into Dylan's recruitment later. And Even though he certainly, Dylan did provide me with one of my favorite quotes at the Under Armour game a couple of years ago. Keelan has been extraordinary, just knocking it out of the park every opportunity. He's been so fun to watch and grow and really grow up and mature as a young man. And he's just such a dynamic second level player. I'm so excited that I'm just so excited that he was able to kind of follow whatever he wanted to do and go to LSU, which is obviously not what Dylan wanted to do. And do something to be close to his family and play for Blake Baker. And he's been so great.
Yeah, he was on my short list too. I'm trying to let you go first so I can pivot accordingly, but his enthusiasm on and off the field, just his personality, when you watch him on the field, he's wrapping up a sack and then he is roaring about it, just really showing his emotion at all times. And then you catch him after and you're going to get at times a little bit of an enthusiastic sermon where he's going to preach to you a little bit about just how much he's enjoying the opportunities that are there for him and not taking any of it for granted. And it was tough the way that this year ended for he and that 25 class at U High. And he's been an awful lot of fun. And I'm glad we're going to have the opportunity to see him on Saturdays here, just right across campus in purple and gold. First guy I'll shout out, I guess, will be Jeremy Elzey, the defensive back / became all-around athlete at Covington High. They got knocked out this past week by Neville, as so many teams have through the years. But Jeremy's development through the course of his high school career, from being kind of a little guy in that Lions secondary to continuing to grow physically and developing his game and become, I think, a top defensive back, a guy that I'm hoping some of these FCS schools make a move on here late potentially, and he gets a chance close to home in the Southland. But also just an all-around playmaker for that Covington team on both sides of the ball and a leader for those guys. And just from a character standpoint, I told his dad during 7-on-7 season that he has been as much of a joy to know as any kid that's come through. There were weekends in 7-on-7 where you watch the team have a really rough weekend, and then he's quick to go be picking up uniforms or trash or whatever it is, and then go thank all the adults for the opportunity to have been a part of that trip and things like that. And so even when things are rough, to watch his character play out, even in behind the scenes ways, I can't say enough about that young man and what he is as not only a young football player, but a young man. The same way I think is probably going to be a running trend with a lot of these guys that we talk about here. But shout out to Jeremy Elzey and looking forward to seeing what's next for him.
Yeah, that is definitely the theme. I'm going to go with Harlem Berry. Very sad to see their playoff run come to an end against St. Edmund. But of course, Harlem, as dynamic as he is on the field, one of the next, obviously, I'm not even going to say that it's a theme on our podcast because we say that every single week. He's just as one of the most dynamic running backs we've ever seen come through Louisiana. I thought he reminded me of Joe McKnight. And that was the comp that we gave him as a sophomore against Riverside. He's had so many great matchups against a stout Riverside defense over the years. Setting all the record books at St. Martin's, bringing them as far in the postseason as they ever had, and they got to go on another little postseason streak there. I got to see him, the St. Martin's Instagram did something cool for him on like his senior night, and it was very touching. He's just such a good kid, and he's going to be electric at MBR. So shout out to HB25.
Another guy that I definitely had on my short list there, and I knew that you had Harlem and Keelan both in mind. I don't know who your third guy is going to end up being. And so I'm going to try and kind of leave the door open for you and pivot around someone who you might take. I'll say Russell Babineau at Acadiana.
Interesting. I was on my short list too, Mr. Roser.
Just like all these guys, I mean, the character that he has brought throughout his high school career, the personality he's brought, it's been great to know Russ from really early on in his overall high school process, and another guy that looks like we're going to get a chance to see here play close to home with the Cajuns, but someone that anywhere you put him on the football field, similarly to the first three guys that we've talked about, he's he's gone out there and been excited to go make plays for the Wrecking Rams. And just, I mean, a great leader for that team. They have a few certainly in that 25 class. I had Russ/DeBetta actually written on my short list to see how this went. But Russell is a kid that is always smiling for whatever reason it may be, whether times are high or times are low, and he's trying to be kind of a bright spot to help his guys shake back. He's someone that has been an absolute pleasure, and shout out to Russell Babineau.
No arguments from me. Russell definitely crossed my mind, and just to piggyback, he's just one of those kids that like always comes to you after practice and is just like so excited to see you. And viewers of this podcast can only imagine that no one really has that reaction to see me. So it always, I love Russ. Sad to see his high school career come to an end, but it was a great time watching him, like you said, in so many different facets of the game. My last one is Jabari Antoine. I love Wampville. I'm the honorary mayor. I have a key to the city. It is behind me. I love that place, and going up there has been such a joy over the last couple of years. I hate that I'm far away now, but I'm going to go check on the Raptor in a couple of weeks and see how he's doing after his surgery. Jabari has been someone that they've talked about in Wampville since he was a freshman. They really, after having Keyshawn Butte and after having the Raptor Derek Williams, they thought Jabari would be in line to be the next. And I couldn't agree more. He's someone who I know you and I have spoken to. I don't know if it was on platform or off platform. He's someone I thought would compete for a 5th star as a senior. He was just so dynamic as a junior before injury, and injury again just kind of keeps biting him. I was happy he got back in time for the playoff run. Obviously, they ran into the high-flying airline squad that Destrehan will now see this weekend. But it's been such a joy to cover Jabari. He's going to head out of state. He's going to play for Miami, which seems to be a team that's trending up in college football. They got a great staff. Shout out to Coach Dennis from formerly of La Tech. Used to see Dennis on the road all the time. Played a big role in closing with Jabari Antoine. One of the best to come from Wamp, and one of my favorites.
Another guy, it was really tough to watch how his high school career had to come to its unfortunate end, because he has been one of the most talented student athletes coming through in these recent years. And so was really sad to hear when he and a couple of his teammates actually all kind of battled through injuries at different points this year. And for him to have to deal with it the last couple of years is really tough. And I guess piggybacking off of that same sort of trend, a guy that we've talked about so much on here, Nate Shepard, Mandeville, got knocked out this past week in a battle with West Monroe. But Nate, we talked about when he had the season-ending injury a few weeks back there in district play. He's a kid that, just continued to handle his business on the field in a way that no matter what he did or what kind of attention that he got, he kept a heavy chip on his shoulder to go be the best possible running back and playmaker that he could be on every single Friday night, and try and disprove folks like me and especially you wrong at times. If there was any running back ranked ahead of him on any list anywhere, he wanted to show anyone that would watch that he was just as good, if not better, than anyone else at the position. And a guy that, with all of that ferocity to his competitiveness on the field, you then talk to him after, and such a smart and thoughtful kid in terms of the way that he viewed things, both for him and his recruitment and his team as a whole, and some of the things they were trying to accomplish these last couple years, as well as just sort of the big picture, and having a sense of what everyone was kind of, all the moving pieces around him, and the recruiting class or recruiting world, or just kind of Louisiana sports world around us. It was tough to watch his season end the way it did, because he was having as great of a 2024 as anyone was around the state.
He's a Rivals 4-star, if you are wondering. So,
hey, he was wanting that 4th star, and I'm glad that y'all finally came to your senses and gave it to him, for sure. I honestly don't know what he is on 3. I don't pay enough attention to the star rankings. It's always been something that there's so much variation to that to me in terms of how guys fit and how it plays out. And maybe, a 3-star one place is a better fit than a 4-star someplace else, and so on and so forth. But I know that was something that he wanted, and I'm glad that he got it, certainly. Looking at some of the guys that we now may have a chance to see in these last couple of weeks, particularly maybe guys that we haven't, I'm going to let you kind of kick it off in terms of who you're thankful is still playing and you might have a chance to see on a Thursday, Friday, or Saturday here in the weeks to come.
Who I'm literally thankful that I'll be able to see is Keelan Russell and Decorian Moore on Saturday.
Rattle off all those out-of-state guys and get them out of the way so we can get
that's who I'm really thankful to be seeing. But no, I have a long list of my Louisiana guys who I've been waiting to see. I've been waiting to see Juju Burns and that Neville squad. That is definitely on my list. So I'm keeping my eye on him. Very thankful that Neville keeps on Nevilling. Alexandria is pounding away. They are unbeaten as the Superdome grows closer, and they are riding the horse that is JT Lindsay. So I am, not only am I thankful, I am crossing my fingers, doing what I can to see JT. I'm thankful for those fighting Ruston Bearcats. I'm hoping that I might be able to catch not only Aiden Anding, who was someone who I felt very strongly was an electric defensive back, but they also have several other great players, including Ahmad Hudson, who I think is absolutely phenomenal. And it's great to see him having his breakout sophomore season, and just one for good measures because it is that holiday season. Dejon Smith at Carr. I'm thankful and hopeful that I'll be able to get to see Dejon because I'm really hoping the more he plays, the more it gets him a chance to get him an offer more in line with the talent that he possesses. I very rarely, almost never, and at this point in my life in social media use, I am very infrequently try to put a kid on. But when our boy Josh did the video of him the other day, the cat had to come out of the bag, and I'm disappointed I haven't seen more traction from these coaches, but I'm staying optimistic because I'm thankful that the Cougars are still playing football.
Just went with sort of like a holiday deal bundle pack of let me try and slip 5 or 6 guys into those 3 positions essentially, and all of those guys,
nobody left for you, unfortunately.
All those guys were certainly guys that I had made notes of. I'm thankful for the fact that I've had a chance to see all of those guys already this season, so that is part of how I kind of swayed to shout out a couple of other guys. Dejon, I was asked a couple of weeks ago and wasn't really prepared for the question of who is maybe the most underrated senior in Louisiana right now from a recruiting standpoint. And there's a great case to be made that it's Dejon. He's someone that if folks there in New Orleans or around the state haven't had a chance to see just yet, he would be someone worth going to check out. Also, JT Lindsay, every time I have a chance to see him, I talk about how he impresses me that much more. I think he's someone that is maybe more in the conversation of the best senior prospect in the state than he gets credit for at times. I don't know if you end up moving him ahead of a Harlem or a Jahkeem or whatnot, but I think he's more at play toward the top of that list than he necessarily always gets his due. And so looking forward to maybe get a chance to see him again. But a couple of guys that I have not had a chance to see this season on some Friday nights that it would be great if those opportunities did present themselves. And so I'm thankful that they're still alive and playing. The Bunky duo, Dylan Compton and Kyle Johnson up there, the things that they're doing for a Panthers program, trying to continue what could be a really historic season for them. They are, I think it was their first undefeated regular season since 2003, and they're trying to get to the quarters for the first time since 88, if I'm not mistaken, on those years. And those two guys have been such leaders for that resurgence for them. It's been great to see Kyle in a variety of settings throughout the last couple of years and to watch highlights of both those guys certainly, but it would be awesome to potentially see them in a semifinal or certainly a dome opportunity. Similar sort of dynamic. Xavier Ford, everything he's done at Leesville throughout his high school career, and the fact that the Wampus Cats just continue to roll on to now a quarterfinal appearance. He's someone that I haven't had a chance to see in pads on a Friday night for those guys and everything that he's done for them. And so if I get a chance potentially to see him as these playoffs advance, I would be grateful for that. And then another storyline of that nature, Jalen Coleman's been phenomenal for Vanderbilt Catholic, everything that he's done as a multi-sport guy. And I've seen him certainly in 7-on-7 and camp settings and basketball court and track state championship and whatnot. But I haven't seen the Terriers play live since he's been in high school. And he's one of those kids that is one of my favorite, not only athletes, but young men, just in line with all these other guys that we're talking so much about. And so thankful that he gets a chance to play on Thanksgiving week and have what is going to be a wild Bayou area matchup with Edie White that I think most of the 985 might get a chance to be out there and watch that one. But those are some guys that I had toward the top of my list, and again, there's plenty more worth shouting out, but just for time's sake, let's keep it to that. I don't know if you want to add to any more of those or get right into these matchups.
I just want to say, have you ever seen the Terriers play?
I saw Vanderbilt. I'm trying to remember what it was, but it was years ago in a playoff game. I think I might have still been in Monroe. Like, I think it might have been like a Vanderbilt versus someone up north type matchup where they took a trip. But it's been a minute.
I saw them against De La Salle back in the day.
Yeah, time flies, bro.
Time flies.
Let's look at some of these overall matchups now. There are some excellent places to be on Friday, no matter where fans may be around the state. Let's kind of run through three each, and we can do it kind of the same way if you want to roll through just three of yours up top.
Okay. I am really excited about this Destrehan Airline game. Offense, thank you. Airline cannot be stopped, and Destrehan has found its gear on offense. Mind you, Marcus Scott is a defensive coach, so I'm curious if Destrehan solves Airline or they keep rolling in a shootout. Jess Curtis Southside against Ruston. I am sore. What?
I thought you were about to, off of that shutout they had in the second round, call it the Jess Curtis curtain of the Sharks defense.
The Jess Curtis curtain is sticking. Listen, when he was at Manny, I remember him telling me that him and Ruston, they did not want to scrimmage each other. They did not get along. There are some who say that Jared Ball was willing to play that game. Well, we'll find out in a couple of days, and so will the rest of the state, because someone's going to hear about it. I'm stoked for that one. That's hard hitting. And then I'm obviously torn between these, but I'm just going to go with my gut. I'm excited for this Dunham versus LCA game. This is, I think, the first real test for Elijah in a couple of weeks. Elijah Haven, the number one quarterback in the country out of the Dunham school, and he's going against LCA, which one has a habit of taking down five-star quarterbacks. They've done so quite a few times against a guy named Manning. And they have just been the standard in that bracket for so many of the past, 7 or 8 years at this point. They have just been the standard. It feels like 7.
Yes,
I think
7 straight state championship appearances.
Yeah, it's something unheard of, and they're the program to beat if you're going to advance to the next level. That's something that St. Charles has done a couple of times to get over the hump. So I think that if Dunham, which is undefeated, playing extraordinarily well, I think if they're going to make this a legitimate run toward the Dome, this is that game for them to get past LCA, which has been there, done that.
That's a game that is very high on my list of potential destinations on Friday, that I think that is as likely as anywhere for me to end up. And so I definitely love that matchup. That's one that, as much as I really enjoy that Bunkie team and think they are capable of making the Dome, and obviously Sumner's having a great season in and of its own right, I looked at Dunham versus Lafayette Christian as a likely quarterfinal that we'd get, and that the winner of that became kind of the team to beat in the top half of that bracket, heading on through D3 Select. So certainly a couple that were on my short list that you nabbed, because that Destrehan Airline game was really high up there. A couple more for me. Riverside and Ascension Catholic, we have talked about those two running backs. We talked about it going into the playoffs that Dedrick Lasty and Chad Elsie Jr. were two of the top 3 or 4 candidates for potential Class 1A Player of the Year. And so to watch those guys and their teams, who have been great 1A programs for years and years, to watch them battle on Friday night, I think is a great small school matchup. Similar to that Destrehan and Airline game, the North DeSoto and Cecilia game, that figures to be a bit of a shootout up there in Northwest Louisiana. Playmakers all over the place, and one that I think either one of those teams is state champion caliber. And so to get them matched up head to head in the quarters should be an exciting one in a place that is, puts on a show on Friday nights, from the opening fireworks and everything else that happens the rest of the game with Luke Delafield and Cole Corey and company. So watching the guys that I just saw last week, Diesel and Braylon Kyle and Brent Gordon and Ellis Stewart and Frankie Frank and all those guys head up there as road dogs as the 18 seed, is going to be a lot of fun. And then I'll give a shout out to this all Baton Rouge matchup, and the fact that Estruma is back in a quarterfinal for the first time since 2003, and right there around the corner, Madison Prep is the higher seed waiting for them. I think that one is a lot of fun for Baton Rouge fans to see those two programs square off and know that one of them is making the semifinals. Probably an awful lot of trash talk around some Thanksgiving tables on Thursday, getting ready for that one. And I think it's going to be one of a slew of awesome kind of regional matchups where you have the Oak Groves and Sterlingtons up north, or the Vanderbilt and E.D. White down the bayou, or Shaw and JFK in New Orleans. There are a lot of those type of matchups, and I think Madison Prep and Estruma might get overlooked a little bit compared to some others, but is one that looks like an awful lot of fun as those teams try to figure out who's going to have the next shot at, whether it be Shaw or JFK. It looks like the top seeded Shaw Eagles are the team to beat, but they've got to get through the Cougars first. But shout out to that Madison Prep and Estruma game.
Sneaky good matchup between Hank Tierney's Shaw Eagles and JFK, which has a lot of speed on that team. When speed could, it's speed versus power coming up on Shaw versus JFK. Big battle in the 504.
Jasper Parker was one of the guys that I had on my list of thankful they're still playing. I had a chance to see him in the scrimmage, but I haven't had a chance to see the Eagles since. But we kind of expected they'd be here at this stage, and now do we eventually get them in the dome? They've got to get through this tough one in New Orleans first. Go ahead.
And they got the winner of that Madison Prep Estruma game waiting. And both of those, especially Madison Prep, scares me.
We're at a point in these brackets where we went from some intriguing first-round matchups to now just all bangers, basically, across the board. Everywhere in the quarterfinals is a lot of fun, and then we're going to get some monster semis out of it. But, Sam, thank you for your time, man.
Hey, Jarrett, thankful for you, man.
He's Sam Spiegelman. I'm Jarrett Roser. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. This is Louisiana versus All Y'all's Recruit That Boot. And until next time, y'all be well and have a great Thanksgiving and a great quarterfinal round of these high school playoffs.